So Steve, just what's the latest? What have you been what have you heard about this shooting that you could share with us?
Well, the most important thing, President Trump is okay, but clearly it was an assassination attempt. There are other injuries. Looks like one, if not more, people that were in the crowd are dead, and obviously, we pray for their families. The shooter is down, by all accounts, dead as well. This is just a tragedy, but it could have clearly been dramatically worse. And a lot of questions are going to be asked later. But right now we just pray for everybody involved, especially President Trump and his recovery, and the families of those who lost loved ones who just went to a political rally today. This never should have happened.
And is it I read your ex post. Is it just because politics these days is just so ratcheted up that you have these extreme points of view on both sides, frankly, that maybe we need to look at this as a reason to try to ratchet things down a little bit?
Yeah, it's one thing to talk about differences of opinion, and clearly, I mean, that's the foundation of our country, is that we express our differences. We go to the streets and vote for people that we disagree with politically. But the calls for violence and almost the hypercharged rhetoric, and when you're seeing one side saying this person on the other side will be a threat to American democracy if he's elected president, all it takes is one lunatic to hear that and act on it, and that may be the case today. And that's the type of rhetoric that needs to be dialed down. Again, let's talk about our differences on policy, on philosophy, but all of these charges that if the other side disagrees with you, then they're a threat to America and all that stuff. That's what we've seen these last few months, and it needs to change.
Do we know anything about the shooter at this point?
Not yet. I would imagine we'll find out a lot. Clearly, in cases like this, the FBI will take the point over Secret Service. They have the shooter. They probably have the gun by the reports we're having. What they're going to do right now is comb all of his social media accounts. They're going to find out a lot more in a very quick period of time. Some of this they may already know and just aren't sharing with the public yet. But I would imagine in the next few days, we'll hear a lot more about what drove him to do this. But clearly, it was an attempt to assassinate Donald Trump because he's the leading candidate for president. And look, this is not something anybody should tolerate in America on either side.
And as a target of a possible assassination yourself, what advice would you give the former president? And has he reached out to you? Have you reached out to him? And just maybe what's going through his mind right now as he's getting checked out?
Yeah, I'm sure he's got a lot of emotions. I texted him earlier and just told him I'm praying for him and how strong he is. And he texted back, and and I'm glad that he's doing well. But look, you go back to the day that I was shot. I mean, he came to the hospital and checked on me and consoled my family. And then that was a tough evening. I was in a coma for 3 days. They didn't know if I was going to make it. And I got to see that side of him. I mean, Donald Trump's an incredibly caring person. It's a side of him that you don't really see as much, but I surely saw it, and I see it a lot. And he cares about this country. And to think that somebody tried to assassinate him because he just wants to make this country great again, it's not something we should accept in American politics.
And Steve, I guess, wherever you may fall on the political spectrum, everyone has to admit that this really is a sad event that happened. And this presidential race is getting more heated and more heated. And maybe it's a chance for people to step back and really think about what's important.
Yeah, look, I mean, anything in life, I mean, if something gets you raged, you don't express it by hitting somebody, by resorting to violence. And in politics, we actually get to settle our differences at the ballot box. And November 5th is the election. It's going to be early voting in just a few months. There's never been more opportunities for people to participate in this democratic process. But violence is not an answer. It's not an answer to anything. It's surely not something that should be acceptable in American politics. And yet we see it rear its ugly head yet again today.
And how does this happen? I mean, you know very well what security is like at a presidential or a former presidential event where everyone is wanted, everyone is screened. And how does this happen? And is that something that Congress needs to take a look at whether these candidates are getting enough security.
Yeah, I've already been in touch with my colleagues. We're going to be having hearings in Congress on this, and just Secret Service has already said that the shooter was outside of the perimeter, but by all reports, he was on top of a rooftop right next to the rally. How does a shooter, a person with a gun, get on top of a rooftop right next to the President of the United States, just 100 feet away, and not be stopped? Those are serious questions that we're going to be having for the Secret Service. There are reports that the Trump Secret Service detail had been asking for additional Secret Service protection and was denied that by the Department of Homeland Security. We've got very serious questions about that too. So we're going to be having congressional hearings on all of those things in the coming weeks. I'm sure, again, we're going to get more facts on the shooter himself, but a lot of serious questions raised. Very, very thankful that Donald Trump is okay, but also praying for those victims that shouldn't be deceased today. The people that just went to a political rally and will not be able to talk about it again.
And finally, do you know if there was any intelligence earlier on that would have warranted additional security? You mentioned that his Social Security, his Secret Service detail wanted additional resources. Was that because there was some actionable intelligence that maybe there was something about to happen?
His detail hasn't shared that with me. I was at a rally with President Trump just a few weeks ago in Wisconsin when we were both in the same town together. He invited me to the rally he was having in Racine, and massive crowds. You had probably over 1,000 people outside that couldn't get in because it was sold out, and yet they still wanted to be there just to see him. And so you see this energy at Trump rallies everywhere. I've been to a number of them, and I'm sure this one was no different inside the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. But outside, clearly there was somebody who decided that this was the day they were going to try to take him out. They were not successful, but they came very close, and that should not have happened.